It had been one of those days where everything seemed to go wrong, starting from the moment I opened my eyes. The alarm didn't go off, so I woke up late. My boss yelled at me for being late again, and I could tell by the way he avoided eye contact afterward that I might not have that job for much longer. On the way home, my car started making a noise that I couldn't afford to get checked out, so I turned the radio up to drown it out and pretended it wasn't there. By the time I got to the small apartment I rented, the sun had started to set, and the weight of the day was crushing me. Bills were piled up on the kitchen counter, like they were mocking me. The electricity bill, the past due rent notice, a medical bill I didn't even want to open. And then, to make things worse, when I opened the fridge, all I found was a half-empty bottle of ketchup, some bread that had gone stale, and a carton of milk that had expired 2 days ago. My stomach growled, reminding me I hadn't eaten all day, but the thought of going to the store filled me with dread. I counted out the crumpled bills and loose change in my wallet, $23 and some coins. That was supposed to last me until Friday. It wasn't enough for everything I needed, but it was enough for something, and right now, something had to be good enough. The grocery store was quiet that evening, with just a handful of shoppers wandering the aisles. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead, and I could smell the faint mix of bakery bread and cleaning products. I grabbed a cart and started down the aisles, keeping my head low. I didn't want to run into anyone I knew. I didn't want to have to explain why I was buying off-brand everything, why I was comparing prices on every single item, or why I looked so exhausted. I grabbed bread, peanut butter, a couple packs of instant noodles, and a bag of apples. Every time I put something in the cart, I did the math in my head, terrified of the total climbing higher than I could cover. At one point, I picked up a pack of chicken breasts, stared at the price, and then put it back. Protein would have to wait. When I finally made it to the checkout, my heart was racing. The cashier, a young woman who couldn't have been older than 20, greeted me with a polite but tired smile. She started scanning my items, the soft beep of the scanner feeling louder with every second. I kept my eyes on the little screen that showed the total climbing higher and higher. $21.87. I breathed a small sigh of relief. I could cover that. Barely, but I could. I started pulling the bills from my wallet, flattening them against the counter, when I heard a voice behind me. "Don't worry about it. I've got it." I froze. At first, I thought I'd misheard. But then I felt a presence beside me, someone stepping up, placing a card down on the counter. I turned to look, and there he was. A man, maybe in his mid-40s, with kind eyes and a face that looked tired but gentle. He was dressed simply, a gray hoodie, worn jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low. He didn't look like someone who wanted attention, and he didn't make a big show of it. He just smiled slightly and nodded, like it was nothing. For a second, I didn't know what to say. My mouth opened, but no words came out. The cashier glanced between us, hesitated, then finished ringing up the groceries. The man swiped his card, the machine beeped, and just like that, my groceries were paid for. "Thank you," I finally managed to whisper, my voice small and shaky. He gave me a nod, almost like he didn't want to make it awkward, then turned and started walking toward the door. No explanation, no chance for me to argue or refuse. I stood there for a moment, stunned, before the cashier handed me my bag. "Have a good night," she said softly, maybe sensing the lump forming in my throat. As I stepped out into the cool evening air, I clutched that bag of groceries like it was gold. My chest felt tight, and my mind raced with questions. Who was that man? Why had he done that? And why did it feel like, somehow, that simple act had cracked something open inside me? I didn't know it yet, but this wasn't just about groceries. That stranger had left something behind, something I hadn't noticed yet, and it would change everything. I walked to my car with the plastic grocery bag digging into my fingers, my thoughts spinning so fast I barely noticed the cool evening air brushing against my face. My chest felt heavy, almost like my body didn't know what to do with what had just happened. It wasn't just the groceries, it was the fact that someone had seen me. Really seen me. I loaded the bag onto the passenger seat and just sat there for a minute, gripping the steering wheel, staring out through the windshield. People walked in and out of the store, going about their evenings like nothing had happened. Meanwhile, I was sitting there, trying to process a kindness I hadn't expected, and didn't think I deserved. I replayed the moment in my head over and over, the quiet way he'd said, "I've got it," the soft nod, the way he'd walked away without waiting for thanks or recognition. There was nothing flashy about it, no attempt to make me feel small or to show off. It was just human. And in that moment, it hit me how long it had been since anyone had done something purely kind for me, without asking for anything in return. Driving home, my mind kept drifting to him, the stranger in the gray hoodie. I tried to remember details, the way his voice sounded, the lines on his face, the small scar near his chin. None of it made sense. Why would someone do that for me? Out of everyone in that store, why me? When I got home, I carried the groceries inside and set the bag on the counter. My kitchen was still dim, the light bulb flickering slightly as if mocking my mood. I unpacked the bread, the peanut butter, the apples, simple food, but now it felt different. It wasn't just dinner, it was proof that someone, somewhere, thought I was worth helping. I opened the pack of noodles and put a pot of water on the stove, trying to ground myself in something normal. But my thoughts kept pulling me back to that moment in the store. I didn't know if I should feel grateful or ashamed. Maybe both. By the time I sat down to eat, the tension in my shoulders had started to ease. I took a bite of the noodles, bland and cheap, but tonight, they tasted like hope. I actually caught myself smiling for the first time in weeks, a small, fragile thing, but real. And that's when I saw it. At the bottom of the grocery bag, tucked between the receipt and the bread, was a folded piece of paper. My heart skipped. I pulled it out slowly, hands shaking, and stared at it for a moment before unfolding it. The handwriting was neat, simple. The note said, "Hard times don't last forever. You're stronger than you think. A friend." I read it once. Then again. And again. My throat tightened, and my eyes stung as I held that note in my hands. Someone, a complete stranger, had gone out of their way to remind me that I wasn't invisible, that I wasn't alone in this fight I'd been quietly losing for months. That note felt like a lifeline. I set it down carefully, as if it might break, and just sat there staring at it while the hum of the refrigerator filled the silence around me. Something inside me shifted that night, something I couldn't quite explain. I don't know what made him choose me that evening. Maybe he saw the exhaustion in my eyes. Maybe he recognized a kind of pain he'd known himself. Whatever the reason, that single act of kindness, and that quiet little note, started something in me that I didn't see coming. And if you're listening to this story right now, please, take a second to hit that subscribe button. Stories like this, moments like this, they matter, and sharing them helps remind all of us that kindness is still out there. I didn't know it yet, but that note wouldn't just sit on my counter collecting dust. It would follow me. It would change me. And, in a way, it would lead me somewhere I never expected to go. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those words in my mind, "Hard times don't last forever. You're stronger than you think. A friend." It was such a simple message, nothing poetic or complicated, but it hit me deeper than anything had in a long time. I woke up before sunrise and found myself standing in the kitchen, staring at that piece of paper sitting on the counter where I'd left it. The early light came through the blinds in soft, uneven stripes, and the room was so quiet that I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. For a moment, I wondered if I'd imagined it all. Maybe the stress had finally gotten to me. But the note was real. The stranger was real. I picked it up again, running my thumb over the ink like I could somehow feel the weight of the words. There was no phone number, no name beyond a friend, no way to reach out. That somehow made it more powerful. This wasn't about getting credit or recognition. It was just someone reaching out across the invisible gap between strangers and saying, "I see you. You're not alone." The rest of the morning, I went through the motions of getting ready for work, but I wasn't really present. While brushing my teeth, while putting on my worn-out uniform, while waiting for the bus that always smelled like stale coffee and wet jackets, the note was in my mind. The words looped through my head like a quiet anthem, and for the first time in months, my chest didn't feel so heavy. That day at work, my boss still barked at me. The customers still complained. My back still ached by lunchtime. But something was different. I caught myself humming under my breath while I stocked shelves. When a coworker asked if I was okay, I didn't brush them off. I even smiled. A real one, not the fake one I'd been wearing for months. It felt strange, almost unsettling, to feel hope again. Like a muscle I hadn't used in so long that I wasn't sure it would work. But every time doubt crept in, every time that voice in my head whispered that nothing would ever change, I thought of that note. When I got home that night, I taped it to the refrigerator. It sounds silly, but I wanted to see it every time I walked into the kitchen. Every time I grabbed something to eat, I'd see those words and remember that moment in the store, the quiet kindness of someone who didn't owe me a thing but helped me anyway. In the days that followed, I found myself carrying the note in my pocket when I went out. It was folded neatly, the creases starting to wear thin from me opening and closing it so many times. It became something I held onto when the bus was late, when I felt invisible in a crowded room, when I thought about all the ways my life wasn't where I wanted it to be. One night, while I sat at the kitchen table eating peanut butter on toast for dinner, I wondered about him, the man in the gray hoodie. Who was he? What made him notice me? Did he leave notes for everyone he helped, or was I just different that day? I thought about walking back to the store, asking the cashier if she knew who he was. Maybe they'd seen him before. Maybe I could find him, thank him properly. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the quiet dignity of what he'd done, no strings attached, no expectations. Maybe I was scared to break the magic of it by turning it into something transactional. Instead, I sat there, staring at the note taped to the fridge, and made myself a promise: if a stranger could believe in me, someone who didn't know my story, my mistakes, or my failures, then maybe I could start believing in myself, too. It wasn't an overnight change. My problems didn't vanish. The bills still came. The car still made that awful noise every time I turned the key. My job was still hanging by a thread. But little by little, I felt a shift. I started holding my head a little higher. Started making small decisions that moved me forward instead of holding me down. The note didn't solve my life. But it reminded me of something I'd forgotten, that even in the darkest moments, kindness can find you. And sometimes, that's enough to keep going. What I didn't know then was that the note was only the beginning. It would lead me to answers I didn't expect, and to a truth that would change everything. For weeks, that note became part of my routine. Every morning before work, I'd glance at it on the fridge. Every night, I'd fold it carefully and slip it into my pocket, just to know it was close. But the more I read those words, the more questions filled my head. Who was he? Why did he help me? And why did it feel like that small act had been meant for me, like he somehow knew exactly what I needed? One Saturday morning, I finally decided I couldn't just sit with the mystery anymore. I needed to find him. Not because I felt like I owed him something, but because I wanted to look him in the eye and tell him that his kindness had mattered. That his note had changed something in me. I started where it all began, the grocery store. The automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh, and the familiar smell of cleaning products and bread hit me. My palms were sweaty, my heart thumping in my chest like I was about to do something wrong. I walked up to the young cashier who'd been there that night. She was bagging someone's groceries, her hair pulled into a messy ponytail, her eyes half-focused like she was running on autopilot. When her line cleared, I stepped closer. "Hey," I started, my voice nervous. "A few weeks ago, there was this guy, he paid for my groceries. Gray hoodie, baseball cap, maybe mid-40s? Do you remember him?" She frowned, thinking. "I think I know who you mean," she said slowly. "He comes in sometimes. Doesn't buy much. Just a few things. Quiet guy. Do you know his name? Or where he lives?" She shook her head. "Sorry. He doesn't talk much. Just smiles, pays, and leaves." Then she tilted her head slightly. "Why? Did something happen?" I forced a small smile. "No. I just wanted to say thank you." I left the store feeling deflated but not ready to give up. Over the next few days, I kept coming back. I'd linger near the produce section, pretending to browse apples, or sit in my car in the parking lot, hoping to catch a glimpse of him walking in or out. Every time the door slid open, my heart would race, and every time, it wasn't him. A week turned into 2, and 2 into 3. I started to feel ridiculous, like I was chasing a ghost. Maybe he'd moved away. Maybe that night had been a one-time thing, and I wasn't meant to find him. But just when I was about to give up, something unexpected happened. I was at the store late one evening, grabbing milk after work. The store was quiet, almost empty, and the hum of the refrigerators filled the silence. As I turned down an aisle, I spotted a familiar shape in the distance, a gray hoodie, a baseball cap, the same easy posture. My breath caught in my throat. It was him. I froze for a moment, my heart hammering, my mind scrambling for what to say. But by the time I worked up the courage to move, he was already heading toward the register. I followed, my steps quick but hesitant, like I was afraid he'd vanish if I moved too fast. By the time I reached the front, he was gone. Just gone. The cashier said he'd paid and left, disappearing into the night as quietly as he'd arrived. I walked out into the parking lot, scanning every direction, but there was nothing. No gray hoodie. No sign of him. Just the hum of cars in the distance and the cool evening breeze brushing my face. I stood there for a while, clutching my bag of milk, feeling both foolish and strangely determined. He was out there. Somewhere. Over the next few weeks, I tried everything, asking around the neighborhood, checking different times of the day at the store, even talking to the security guard who worked evenings. Everyone knew of him, but no one really knew him. He keeps to himself, the guard said once, shrugging. But he's always polite. Always smiles. That's about all I know. I went home that night feeling frustrated but strangely hopeful. Even if I never found him, just knowing that someone like him existed made the world feel a little less cold. And somewhere deep down, I had this quiet certainty that our paths would cross again. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But someday. What I didn't realize then was that the answer I was looking for, the reason behind his kindness, would come to me in a way I never expected, and it would change everything I thought I knew about that stranger in the gray hoodie. Something shifted in me after that night, and it wasn't something I could easily explain. At first, it was subtle. I didn't wake up one morning magically optimistic or suddenly free from the problems that weighed me down. The bills were still there. My job was still shaky. My car still threatened to die on me every other day. But something deep inside me had been lit, a quiet, stubborn little spark that refused to go out. I started carrying myself differently. At work, when my boss snapped at me, I didn't shrink the way I used to. I didn't fight back either, I just breathed through it, telling myself that this moment, like every hard moment, wouldn't last forever. I remembered the words from that note, hard times don't last forever, and somehow, it helped me push through the noise in my head. And for the first time in a long time, I started noticing other people. Really noticing them. The older man at the bus stop every morning, sitting there with the same worn-out lunchbox. The single mom at the corner store, digging through her purse with 2 kids clinging to her coat. Even the teenager at work who always kept his headphones in, pretending not to care about anything. It was like that stranger's kindness had flipped a switch in my brain. I'd spent so much time trapped in my own problems, my own pain, that I'd stopped seeing the people around me. Now, I couldn't stop. One afternoon, I saw a woman in the grocery store, the same one where everything had started, standing in the aisle staring at a pack of diapers. She kept picking it up and putting it down, her face tight with worry. Without thinking, I walked over, grabbed the pack, and said, "I got it." She blinked at me, startled, like I'd just spoken a language she didn't understand. "You don't have to," she started, but I just shook my head. "Trust me," I said softly. "It's nothing." At the checkout, I paid for the diapers and handed them to her. She whispered a thank you, her voice cracking, and before she could say anything else, I gave her a small smile and walked away. My heart was pounding, my hands shaking, but in a strange way, it felt like breathing again after being underwater too long. After that, it became a quiet mission. I didn't have much, most weeks, I was still counting coins just to make it to payday, but I found little ways to give. A cup of coffee for the bus driver on cold mornings. A sandwich for the guy who slept on the bench near my building. Leaving a few extra dollars in the tip jar for the barista who always smiled, even when she looked exhausted. And every time I did, I thought about him, the stranger in the gray hoodie. How he hadn't wanted thanks, how he just walked away after leaving that note. It wasn't about the money. It was about the message, "I see you. You matter." Slowly, I started to see changes in myself, too. My nights weren't as heavy. My mornings didn't feel like battles anymore. There were still bad days, plenty of them, but even on those days, I didn't feel as alone as I used to. One night, after helping a kid in my building carry his mom's groceries up 3 flights of stairs, I sat in my apartment and finally allowed myself to feel proud. Not of the act itself, but of the person I was becoming. Someone who cared. Someone who noticed. Someone who, in some small way, was making the world a little less lonely. That note was still taped to my fridge, the edges curling now, the ink fading just slightly. But I didn't need to read it every day anymore. It had become part of me, those words etched somewhere deep inside. And even though I still hadn't found him, even though I still didn't know his name, I carried him with me everywhere I went. His kindness had rippled through my life in ways I never could have predicted, and I knew, without a doubt, that if I ever saw him again, I'd tell him that. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that I was closer to finding him than I thought. And when I finally did, the truth behind that note, and the man who'd written it, would shake me in ways I wasn't ready for. It happened on a rainy Tuesday evening, weeks after I had almost given up hope of ever seeing him again. The kind of evening where the sky feels too heavy, and the streets glisten under the streetlights. I had stopped by the grocery store after work, the same store where it all began, just to grab some eggs and milk. I wasn't expecting anything more than a quiet trip home. But as I was walking down the cereal aisle, I heard a familiar voice. It wasn't loud, just a soft laugh, but it froze me in place. I turned my head, and there he was, the man in the gray hoodie, the stranger who had changed my life. My heart jumped into my throat. For a second, I didn't move. He looked the same, the cap pulled low, the quiet, almost shy demeanor. He was talking to the cashier near the self-checkout, his hands in his pockets, that same tired but kind smile on his face. Before I could think twice, my legs carried me toward him. "Excuse me," I said, my voice shaky. He turned, his eyes meeting mine, and for a moment, he just looked at me, as if trying to place where he'd seen me before. "You," I said, my words tumbling out. "You were here. Weeks ago. You paid for my groceries. You left me that note." His eyes softened, and something shifted in his expression, a mix of recognition and quiet sadness. "Yeah," he said simply. "I remember." I wanted to say 1,000 things at once, how much that night had meant to me, how that small act of kindness had changed me, but nothing came out. Instead, I just stared at him, my hands gripping the grocery basket like it was the only thing keeping me upright. "Why?" I finally asked. "Why did you do it? You didn't even know me." He hesitated, glancing around as if deciding whether to share what was clearly a piece of his heart. Then he sighed and motioned for us to step outside. The rain had slowed to a light drizzle, and we stood under the overhang near the carts. "I used to come here with my wife," he began quietly. "Every Saturday morning. She'd make a list, and we'd come together. She loved this store for some reason." He gave a small, sad smile. 2 years ago, she got sick. By the time we caught it, it was too late. She passed in less than 6 months. I swallowed hard, my chest tightening as he continued. "After she died, I didn't know what to do with myself. Everything felt empty. But one thing stuck with me, she always believed in helping people. She'd see someone struggling and just step in. No hesitation. She used to say, 'Kindness is the one thing you can give that never runs out.'" He paused, his voice catching for a moment. "So now, I come here sometimes. I look for someone who looks like they need a hand. And I do what she would have done. No questions. No thanks needed. Just kindness, because that's what she taught me." I felt my throat tighten as his words sank in. All this time, I had been searching for some grand explanation, some reason that made sense to me. And here it was, simple, heartbreaking, and beautiful all at once. "I kept that note," I said softly. "It's on my fridge. It got me through some of my worst days. And because of you, because of her, I started helping other people too. Nothing big, but it feels like breathing again. Like maybe I can matter, even in small ways." He looked at me for a long moment, then smiled, a real smile, warm and a little sad. "Then she'd be proud," he said quietly. We stood there in silence for a while, the rain dripping softly from the awning, the distant hum of traffic filling the space between us. Before we parted, I asked his name. He hesitated, then finally said, "Daniel." I told him mine, and we shook hands, not as strangers anymore, but as two people connected by something neither of us could quite explain. As I drove home that night, the note felt heavier in my pocket, not because of the paper, but because of what it carried now. It wasn't just words from a stranger anymore. It was a gift from a man still carrying his wife's kindness, spreading it in quiet ways that most people would never even notice. And for the first time since that day in the store, I didn't feel like I was chasing a ghost. I'd found him. I'd found the truth. What I didn't realize then was that meeting Daniel wasn't the end of this story. It was just the beginning of something I never saw coming, a new chapter, one that would teach me even more about what kindness can do, and how it can ripple through lives in ways we may never fully understand. It's been over a year since that day in the grocery store, but I still carry the note in my wallet. The paper is wrinkled now, soft at the edges from being unfolded so many times, but the words are still clear, still powerful. Kindness is free. Pass it on. I've learned that those 4 words hold more weight than I could have ever imagined. Back then, I thought kindness was something rare, something reserved for special people or special situations. Now, I know that kindness is a choice, a daily, deliberate choice. And I make that choice every single day. After I found out who the stranger was and why he had done what he did, something shifted inside me. I stopped waiting for my life to change on its own. I started small, holding doors open, paying for someone's coffee, smiling more. But the real change wasn't in what I was doing, it was in how I saw people. I started to look at them, really look at them, and see that everyone is carrying something heavy. One afternoon, about 6 months ago, I was standing in line at that same grocery store. There was a young mom ahead of me, balancing a toddler on her hip and counting out change for a small bag of groceries. I could see the panic in her eyes as the cashier told her she was a few dollars short. My heart pounded as I stepped forward and quietly said, "I've got it." She looked at me like I was from another planet, just like I had looked at him. As I walked out with my own groceries, she chased me down in the parking lot. She was crying, thanking me over and over. And in that moment, I understood exactly what he must have felt the day he helped me. That quiet satisfaction of knowing you had been there for someone, not for praise, not for recognition, but simply because you could. Sometimes I wonder if he somehow knows how much his gesture changed my life. I wonder if he'd be proud of the person I'm becoming. Because I'm not the same woman I was. I'm stronger now, more open, more hopeful. I don't carry the same heaviness I used to, because I've learned that even in the hardest moments, there are people willing to share the load. I also started volunteering once a week at a local food bank. At first, I thought I was doing it to give back, but the truth is, it gives me more than I could ever give anyone else. The stories I hear there, families trying to make ends meet, people battling illness, kids stepping up to help their parents, remind me every time how important compassion really is. I think about the stranger often. Sometimes when I'm driving, I catch myself glancing at sidewalks, wondering if I'll see him again, maybe crossing a street or waiting for a bus. Maybe he's moved on, maybe he's helping someone else, maybe he's somewhere far away. But a part of me hopes that someday, our paths will cross again so I can tell him in person what he started in me. What I know now is that one act, one small, quiet act, can ripple through a life in ways no one can measure. That stranger didn't just pay for my groceries. He gave me a new perspective, a new purpose. He taught me that kindness isn't about grand gestures, it's about the small moments that add up, the simple decisions to make someone's day a little lighter. I used to think I was invisible, just another face in the crowd. But that day, when a stranger saw me, really saw me, it reminded me that none of us are truly invisible. We all matter. We all have the power to make someone feel seen. Now, every time I unfold that note, I smile. It's a reminder, a promise I've made to myself. No matter how hard life gets, I will keep passing it on. Because I've learned that the world changes in those quiet, ordinary moments, one person at a time. And it all started with a stranger, a note, and a choice to believe in kindness.